Hey guys, welcome to lecture number 5, which is on colostrum feeding best practices. This is also part 1 of intensive calf feeding management. Right. I hope if you haven't done the questions yet, I urge you to go back to the questions. Remember, answering those questions are really important. Going through those questions, letting your brainstorm answers. Right? Don't worry about getting them wrong. You will get wrong answers, but that doesn't matter. The idea here is not for you to get correct answers, but for you to synthesize some kind of answer, from your brain, within your brain, without referring to, other stuff, right? So if you haven't answered the questions yet, please stop the video right now, go back to your questions, answer them, and come back to the video. Okay, now this shows the composition of colostrum, right, and what's called transitional milk. Right, so this is the first milking number 1, first one soon after the calf is born, second one 12 hours after the calf is born, third one 24 hours after the calf is born, right? So immediately after the birth, 12 hours after, 24 hours after, and this is milk, the composition of milk. Right, so what this shows is, see how it gradually transitions to milk, right? From 24% to 18 to 14 to 13, right? So this is not going to go from 14 to 12 just like that in a flash, but there will be another milking or two here, right? So we call this milk, right, transitional milk. So this would be colostrum, this would be regular milk, and what's in between, right, the second day and third day, right, so would be transitional milk. Okay, so observe how each of these gradually decrease to become milk. Everything decreases except lactose, which increases. Right, so I gave you a question on the pre-lecture question series. So why is everything high in colostrum compared to milk except lactose? Right, of course, we know, immunoglobulins is one of the major functions of colostrum. So colostrum has a very large amount of immunoglobulins compared to milk, right? 6 times 8, 48, so that's 80 times more immunoglobulins than colostrum, than milk, right, in colostrum. Proteins, almost 5 times. Total solids, almost twice as much. Milk, fat, 175% higher. Minerals higher. Vitamin A higher. But lactose is like half. I hope you have given this enough thought, right? I mean, obviously, if you think about the energy aspect, giving lactose would be okay, right? Giving lactose would be some extra lactose wouldn't hurt. Gives calves extra energy, right? But in spite of that, colostrum has less lactose. Why is that? Right, so we will discuss those at the question and answer session. Right, I'm not going to reveal those here. I will let you think about it. I will let you refer the internet, right? I'm not going to disclose those answers here, right? Okay, those are only for the ones who attend the question and answer series. Right, so now when we talk about immunity, what comes to our head are immunoglobulins, right? But if you go through this, you will see that immunoglobulins are not the only type of immune molecules that colostrum contains, right? It has so many other things, right? So do read about this and be aware. Right? I'm sure you have covered most of these in immunology during the second year pathobiology lectures, right? But go through them here because colostrum specifically has all these ingredients, constituents, right? And then it's not only the nutrients or the immunity related molecules that colostrum has. It also has many growth factors, right? Such as these IGF-1 and 2, transforming growth factor, alpha and beta, epidermal growth factor, fibroblast growth factor, and platelet-derived growth factors, etc., which are also very useful for the calves' growth. Right, so be aware of these as well. Right. So last week we briefly talked about the 4 aspects of colostrum feeding. Right. So you cannot go to a farmer and tell him, I say you have to give this calf colostrum. Colostrum harira puvanone. You have to give the calf properly. That's not good enough, right? You have to elaborate. You have to, address these 4 areas and be specific, right? So how much colostrum should the farmer feed the calf, right? So this is determined by the level of immunity, the level of serum immunoglobulins the calf will achieve, right? So, I think I mentioned this last week also. So we say for a calf to be considered immune, right? It has to have at least 10 milligrams per ml of immunoglobulins in its serum, right? So 10 is the magic number. Of course, when it drinks colostrum, it will get not only immunoglobulins but all the things I showed in the previous slide as well, right? But we can quantify our immunoglobulin, right? So it should get at least 10 milligrams per ml, right? Now remember we talked about different types of immunity: passive immunity and active immunity, right? So what type of immunity is this? Right, this is passive immunity because this is not being manufactured inside the calf's body, right? This is not acquired. This is passive immunity that the calf passively gets from the mother after birth, right? So the other type of passive immunity is via the placenta, right? So you see here, right? So immediately soon after birth, right? When the calf is fed colostrum, it takes a little bit of time for immunoglobulins to go up in the serum because first the milk goes into the abomasum, right? From there into the proximal gut, right? Where it gets absorbed into the bloodstream, and then that's when immunoglobulin concentration goes up, right? But this is not something that happens suddenly. It takes a little bit of time, right? So you see now even after 10 hours, right, of giving a proper colostrum dose, it still hasn't gone beyond this 10 milligrams per ml mark. Right? So that's why you have to give it a second time also. It's only after the second dose that it will go beyond 10 milligrams, right? So all of these have been scientifically shown, right? So the question is, we still haven't got an answer for our question, which is, how much colostrum to be given, right? So this depends on right? Several factors. Again, we talked about this last week, right? So this depends on the size of the calf, right? So your goal is to achieve 10 milligrams per ml serum immunoglobulins, but depending on the calf size, it could be a 20 kilogram calf, it could be a 30 kilogram calf, it could be a 40 kilogram calf. So depending on the size of the calf, obviously the amount of colostrum or the amount of immunoglobulins you will have to feed will be different, right? So we generally, so this depends on the volume of the circulatory system, the blood, right? So obviously 40 kilogram calf will have more blood than a 20 kilogram calf, right? So so we can estimate the amount of blood or plasma in a calf by multiplying the body weight of the calf by 9%, right? So so 40 kilograms times 9%, you are going to get something like 3.6 kilograms. We are going to call it 3.6 liters for convenience, right? So typically a 40 kilogram calf will have about 3.6 liters of blood, right? Now, so all of this 3.6 liters of blood, right, you have to get, you have to reach this strength of immunoglobulins, right? So how much serum immunoglobulin do you need to get 10 milligrams per ml? Okay, so first of all, what is how many grams of liter for 3.6 liters, right? So you need to do that calculation, right, to get 10 milligrams per ml in 3.6 liters of blood. How many grams altogether in total, right? Then you also need to remember that not all the immunoglobulins you feed a calf will get absorbed through the gut. Only about 35% gets absorbed. Now I said 36% here for convenience because it's 3.6 liters, 36%, right? So basically, if you feed 100 grams of immunoglobulin, only 36 will get absorbed. The other 64 grams, will coat the mucosa. Some will pass with the feces and so on, right? So you'll get a number here which says, okay, this amount of grams need to be fed for a 40 kilogram calf to reach 10 milligrams per ml, right? Okay, and so you have a number here. I don't know what that is. Let's say it is 500 grams, right? So if it is 500 grams, can you say any colostrum will have the same strength? You can't, right? Which we talked about last week. So different colostrum will have different strength of immunoglobulin, right? So how many liters would you need if the colostrum had 25 grams per liter of immunoglobulin? How many liters would you need if the colostrum had 50 grams per liter of immunoglobulin, right? So you need to think that way, right? So this is really, scary statistic. It has been estimated that over 30% of cows have less than 50 grams per liter even in the USA, right? So which leads to something called FPT, is failure of passive transfer of immunity, right? So 30% cows have less than 50 grams, meaning more than 30% of the calves will have FPT. In Sri Lanka, it's probably worse, right? So I urge you to look up this paper, and I took this from this paper, Nationwide Evaluation of Quality and Comparison of Colostrum in Dairy Farms in the United States, right? This goes through some of these figures. It is really important, right? I urge you to check that out. Okay, I hope this is clear to you. Right, so now you know how much to feed, but then you know that, but can you explain that to a farmer? Can you explain, imagine a small scale farmer from a rural area with no formal education. Can you explain him everything about 10 milligrams per ml serum concentration, 50 milligrams per ml colostrum concentration, and all that? No, you can't, right? So you'll have to give him a general recommendation, right? So this general recommendation we give usually assuming that the colostrum actually does not have 50 grams per liter, right? So if we assume colostrum has 50 grams per liter, uh, and the colostrum actually does not have that, then you're underfeeding, right? But if you assume the colostrum only has 25 and it happened to have 50, you're not doing any harm because you're just giving more immunoglobulins. As you'll see later on, the more immunoglobulins, the better, right? So when we give the general recommendation, we assume that the colostrum only has 25 grams per liter, right? And we recommend giving 4 liters of colostrum for a 40 kilogram Holstein Friesian calf, right? So if the colostrum had 25 grams only per liter, by giving 4 liters, you are feeding it 100 grams, right? So out of the 100, 36 will get absorbed, and when 36 grams get absorbed, each ml, each liter will have 10 grams per liter in serum, which is equivalent to 10 milligrams per ml, right? But if it happened to have 50 grams per liter, all the better. It will have twice as much immunoglobulin as required. So instead of 10, it will have 20 milligrams per ml, which is even better, right? So if you give only 2 liters, you won't reach the 10 milligram mark. If you give 1 liter, you still won't reach. That's not enough. And one dose alone also doesn't reach 10 milligrams. That's why you have to repeat a second dose within 12 hours, right? See, it's only after that second dose immunoglobulin levels will go above 10 grams per liter or 10 milligrams per ml, right? So that is really important to understand. Okay, so if it was a host inflation, then the numbers, I'm sorry, if it was a Jersey or a Sahiwal calf, typically you expect them to be 20 to 25 kilograms. The numbers are different, right? So if it's a 30 kilogram calf, again, numbers would become 3, 1.5, so on, right? So you need to be aware of that. I mean, if you know the type of calf that is going to be born, right, when the cow is pregnant, you can predict the weight and advise the farmer accordingly, or you can ask the farmer to weigh the calf as soon as it's born and to call you, and you will tell him how much colostrum to feed, right, depending on the level of the educational level of the or the intelligence level of the farmer. Okay, be aware sometimes the farmers are more intelligent than you are, right? Okay, so this is what I talked about the 12-hour second dose, the importance of giving second dose within 12 hours. Right. And then how soon should colostrum be fed? Right. Now you see um, the immunoglobulin absorption efficiency goes down with time. See, by about 24 hours, it comes down to about 30%, right? So we call this phenomenon gut closure, right? Gut closure. So the the intestinal mucosa or the gut wall is permeable, or it's open for absorbing cholesterol IgG only during the first few hours. So that's what's important to understand, right? So remember this. Now earlier I said the absorption efficiency is 36%, 35%, right? So this doesn't mean 100% gets absorbed at birth. What it means is of maximum. So the maximum is in fact 35%, which is 100%, 35%, right, of whatever you feed. And so if you feed 100 grams of immunoglobulins, it will absorb 35 grams, right? And 50% would mean in 12 hours, 50% would mean 17 grams, right? It doesn't mean 100 grams will be absorbed here and 50 grams absorbed here, right? I hope that's clear. So what exactly is gut closure, right? Why is gut closure important? I hope you have understood, answered the questions and synthesized some kind of answer to this, right? Now, what you need to understand is that immunoglobulins are massive molecules, right? See, the heavy chain, the light chain, right? So heavy chain, the light chain, right? And look at the size of this, 440 amino acids, 220 amino acids, and then you have multiples of this, right? Now, see, but so these are massive molecules, but so these are basically like peptides, right? And polypeptides. You remember when you learned digestive physiology, you would have learned that proteins are broken down into polypeptides and then into peptides, and then what crosses the gut epithelium, the mucosa, are like individual amino acids, right? Whereas you can't absorb, 1,000 amino acid large polypeptide, right? So what happens if the gut is open or permeable to such large molecules? What else will cross the gut epithelium? Some unwanted stuff as well, such as, right, such as microbes, bacteria, viruses, and you don't want that to happen, right? So that's why in animals usually the gut is closed, right, and only allows penetration or uptake of small molecules, whereas antibodies are large, right? So therefore the calf cannot afford to keep the gut open for a long time, long period, right? So although this picture illustrates as if there are actual physical gaps between cells, what actually happens is it's the physiology, right? So immunoglobulins are taken up by a process called endocytosis or pinocytosis or macropinocytosis. If you refer, books or papers, those are the terms you'll find. So this mechanism takes place only during the first few hours of life, and later on, this mechanism ceases to function, right? So therefore, even though you have a lot of immunoglobulins on this mucosal end, right, mucosal side of the gut, cells will not uptake it in such a manner, right? Therefore, however much antibodies there are, it doesn't it doesn't make it to the blood of the calf, right? So I hope now it's clear why gut closure is important. Okay, right. And well, I'll tell you one more thing. So I think I asked a question about okay, uh, is IgG the only class of immunoglobulins found in colostrum? No, there are other types of immunoglobulins as well, such as IgA, IgM, IgD, IgE. Right, so they have different functions. I urge you to refer it up. I'll tell you one important function of IgAs. Do you remember from your immunology what the function of IgAs were? So the IgAs specialize in coating a mucosal surface, right? A hollow organ and protecting, right? So when the gut is in a open state like this, right? Now bacteria, viruses can also enter because the calf is naturally not in a sterile environment, right? There will be microbes entering the calf's mouth together with the colostrum from the mother's teeth, skin, and then from the ground, from all over where the surroundings of the calf, right? So then IgAs will coat the mucosal surface of the gut and provide local protection, right? And it will destroy bacteria, viruses, and prevent them from entering. But I'm sure a few of them will probably get in anyway, right? So that's the function of IgA in this scenario, right? So now we've talked about these three aspects: how much colostrum to give, how soon to give, right? um, and how often to give the second one, right? Right. So now, why do we need to give it so soon? So we talked about one of the reasons, which is gut closure, right? We have to give it as soon as possible because of gut closure. If gut closure takes place, uh, then you have to give a lot more colostrum. See, if you give colostrum right here, if you give 100 grams, 35 will get absorbed. Here, if you give 100 grams, only 17 will get absorbed. And if you want the animal to absorb 35 grams, now you have to give 200 grams, which is double the amount of colostrum. If you give here, animal is probably going to absorb only 10 grams out of 100. Right? If you want the animal to absorb 30 grams, then you have to give 300 grams of immunoglobulins, which is triple the amount of colostrum compared to here, right? So this is why you want to give as early as possible so that the absorption efficiency is highest, right? And you can achieve that level of immunity with a relatively small volume of colostrum. Right? So that is one reason why you need to um, give colostrum as soon as possible, right? ASAP, as soon as possible. And a second reason is because of this. And what does this tell you? Take a minute and see if you can understand what this says. This shows that the concentration of cholesterol IgG decreases with time, right? So let's say if um, you know if you say uh, colostrum has 100% antibody strength soon after birth, right, hours after birth, right, uh, and then at 6 hours it becomes 83%, at 10 hours it becomes so on, right? So it gradually decreases with time, right? So this is not colostrum that has been milked and kept outside. This is freshly milked colostrum after a number of hours, right? So let's say in this case you don't milk for 6 hours, so this is not the second milking, right, but the first milking, but only done 6 hours after calf birth. This is done 10 hours after calf birth. This is done 14 hours after calf birth, but no other colostrum milkings take place before that. Yet, see, the colostrum antibody concentration has rapidly gone down. A 33% decrease in 14 hours. How do you explain that? Do you think the antibodies get destroyed while it's inside the udder? Think about it and see if you can synthesize an answer. We will talk about it at the discussion, right? At the live discussion. Okay. Can you think of a third reason? Right. So now 95% of Sri Lankan farmers, over 90%, are small scale farmers, right? Some of them will have refrigeration facilities, but most of them will not, right? So, what do you think happens when the milk is kept in room temperature? When the milk is kept out, right, after milking, bacterial counts double every half an hour. Right, so this is why it is important to get the milk inside a chiller as soon as it is milked out. Right, so refrigeration is very important. That's why in the village setting, the collected milk is taken to a chiller, which whose temperature is 4 degrees Celsius. Right. So these are the three reasons why you should give colostrum to calves as soon as possible. Gut closure, this phenomenon of dilution of antibodies, and then bacterial multiplication. The longer you keep in room temperature, the longer the higher the bacterial numbers, and obviously you don't want to give colostrum with bacteria to a calf that is uh, non-immune, right? So now we finally come to the fourth aspect of colostrum feeding, which is which route, right? Obviously you have to give it via the oral route. Fecal route or urinal route doesn't work, or the nasal route, right? But we do, what is that what we mean here, or is it something else we mean here? So this is what we mean by which route, right? So you can feed calves milk with a bottle using a bucket, a calf feeder. So this actually, you insert this tube into the stomach, uh, uh, say intubate, or you tube a calf through the esophagus, right? So you insert the tube through the mouth into through the esophagus into the stomach, right? Or you can just go all natural, which is calf suckling the mother. Right. So which one of these do you think is most suitable in the modern practice? Right. Um, so if you answered bottle feeding, right, you answered right. But why? Why? What are the different pros and cons of each of these methods, right? So I talk about those here. I don't want to go into too much detail. You can just go through these self-explanatory. I'll tell you one thing, I'll show you one thing here. You see the difference of the two pictures on this one and this one, right? So where do you want the milk to go? Which chamber? Omasum, reticulum, abomasum, or rumen? And if you answered abomasum, you answered right. But you see here, some milk has gone into the rumen. Here, there's no milk in the rumen. Everything is in the abomasum. So what do you think? What prevented milk going into the rumen here, and what made milk go into the rumen here? Can you remember recall your physiology and anatomy? Can you remember the reason? So if you said esophageal groove reflex, right? Then you got the answer right. So you don't want milk to go into the rumen, right? Because rumen is where the microbial digestion takes place, and abomasum is where the enzymatic digestion takes place, right? So what we want is for milk to undergo enzymatic digestion, right? So for enzymatic digestion to happen, milk has to go into the abomasum, and the anatomical structure that does that is um, the esophageal groove, right? So for proper esophageal groove closure, right, you need to have this posture. See, neck extended up, right? Just like when drinking from the mother. Whereas if the calf drinks from a bucket, the neck is pointing downwards, and uh, esophageal groove closure does not take place properly, right? So that's all I'm going to tell you about this slide. You can, self-study and answer the questions. Self-study that particular slide, right? So I have also included two references about colostrum and esophageal groove closure, right? So I urge you to go through those to be able to answer some of the questions I ask in the pre-lecture questions. You have to refer to those two documents. So they are very long. I don't want you to go through the whole document, but scan the documents and find the answers. Okay, right? So I took this photograph in Australia. In Australia, right? So you see, these are neither buckets nor bottles, but they have a teat here, right? So you come from the other side and add milk here with a bucket, right? And then five calves can drink milk at the same time. So this is called communal feeding. Community එකක් වගේ, group feeding or communal feeding you can call them. You can call these communal feeders, right? So you get these in different sizes and shapes. Some of these are like linear like this, some of them are circular, so that calves can come from around it and drink, even up to 10-20 calves, very large communal feeders. So I'll show you one thing here. So there's something wrong in this picture. Wrong meaning something is not right in the management. Can you say what that is? You see, this calf or heifer is much larger than the others, right? So this one is small, this one is very large. So what happens when when the size is not homogeneous? What happens is that the large calf will drink quickly, faster, and then drink from the others also, right? So this young small guy always gets pushed out, and this guy will ඔලුවෙන් ගහලා මෙයා වයින් කරලා එයාගේ කිරි එකත් බොනවා. හරි? So that is bad practice. If you group animals, whether they are calves or large animals, does you always have to group them by similar size, right? So I don't remember where this was. Probably either Nicavartia or Manikpalam, a calf pen, and these are some modern calf pens, right? I saw these in Australia. Can you spot the difference? One of the major differences. I'm not talking about the plastic versus wood. Regarding what we learned here, can you spot the difference? So pause the video until you spot the difference. Right. So the difference is you have two buckets here, and you have two buckets and a bottle here. Right. So if you give milk via the bucket, what will happen? Part of it will go into the rumen, not the abomasum, right? So that's why this is best practice. The bottle should be here so that when the calf drinks from the bottle, the neck will be extended, throat reflex will get activated, esophageal groove closure will take place, and all milk will go into the abomasum, right? What are these two buckets used for? One is for water, the other one is for grass, no. Hay, no. No. So this should be for calf starter, right? So we will talk about that later. But young calves are not given roughages, right? So they are given milk, water, and calf starter, which is a concentrate feed. No roughage, no grass, hay at the beginning. Okay, so freshly born calf, see the mother is still not done cleaning the animal. Remember the golden hour we talked about? So this is probably the golden hour. Four activities: cleaning the calf, and then look at the farmer feeding milk in a relatively raised position of their neck. See a small girl feeding. See correct posture in an Asian country, right? And see correct feeding posture. The bottle is raised so that the calf's neck gets extended, right? So that proper esophageal groove closure will take place. So remember that, huh? So this is a project that I did with one of the current semester 7 students, who is Asanka Silva, right? So now these bottles are very expensive, right? They cost about 2,500 rupees, right? And there is no replace. So when these teats are used, calves will bite on the teat. The calves will bite on the teat, and the teat will break off, right? So what he did was, we made a teat that would fit any regular mega bottle, right? And then we were able to manufacture these for a very small cost, like 100 rupees, right? And so we still haven't started manufacturing at a commercial level, but that's the idea, to feed, to manufacture, and to make them commercially available so that people can use these bottles, any mega bottle, freely available disposable bottle with a teat, right? So there it is. Right, so now I've gone through the four aspects of colostrum feeding: how much, how often, how soon, and which route, right? So I hope you understood all of those properly. And so a common question that I ask during exams is, what is the best option with regard to the route of feeding, right? So I said the first best option is obviously the bottle, right? Bottle feeding is best. And what's the second option if bottle is not available? What do you think is the second option? Is it bucket feeding? Is it suckling the calf? Is it feeding via a calf feeder? What's best? as the second option. Okay, so what's the third option then? Right? So find answers to these questions and we will discuss them at the live discussion session. Okay, so I'll give a quick summary of the four aspects. Right, so which route bottle feeding is best, how much, remember, 4 liters the first dose, another 4 liters the second dose, which is to be given within 12 hours, and then how soon, within 2 hours, sooner the better, right? So this for a 40 kilogram calf. So the actual formula would be 20% of the body weight first day one dose, right? So 10% bid, right? So 40 kilogram calf, 10% is 4 liters, right? 10% twice a day in 12 hours. Repeat soon after birth, within 2 hours, and then repeat in 12 hours. And now it's very easy to put these in writing, right? But it's not easy to feed 4 liters to a calf, a newly born calf, right? It's a bit of a challenge, and you'll have to use a little bit of force to make the calf drink 4 liters, right? So that's one of the advantages of the calf feeder stomach tube, right? You can basically force any amount of milk into the calf, right? But with a bottle or bucket, you can't make the calf drink all of it, right? So ideally, if a calf is born at 4 a.m., for example, it should be fed the first 4 liters within the first 2 hours, and then by 6 p.m., 12 hours, the second 4 liters, right? But sometimes it might not be easy for you to feed all 4 liters at once, especially the second dose, because the stomach is already full from the first 4 liters. So something you can try is, if that fails, you give the first 4 liters within the first 2 hours, and then break the second dose to two components as 2 liters each, something like that. But preferably, this is what you should try and do. Okay, so even more than the second dose, the first dose is absolutely critical, right, for the calf's well-being. Okay, so this chart compares actually five groups of calves that received different levels of immunoglobulins, right? See, milligrams per ml. This group received less than 5 serum milligrams immunoglobulin, 5 to 10, 10 to 15, 15 to 25, and over 25. So take a minute and study this table right before I start explaining this. Okay, I hope you pause the video for 1 minute and study this. If you haven't yet, I urge you to pause the video for 1 minute and look at the different relationships of different parameters. And so basically what you need to understand is lower the serum immunoglobulin concentration, right? Lower the weight gain. Let's say this group basically grew 2 kilograms more than this group, right, at 4 weeks. Feed conversion ratio, lower is better. So basically this means this group required only 1.8 kilograms to gain 1 kilogram of body weight, whereas this group, less than 5 group, required 2.7 kilograms of feed to gain 1 kilogram of body weight, right? So fecal score, right? So if it's close to 1, then it's normal. If it's higher, it's loose or watery,
right? So high fecal score in this group compared to that group, right? Um, covers is like diarrhea, how many days diarrhea, right? See, it's much better with this group. Mortality, bottom line eventually is mortality and growth, right? See, 30% versus 8%, like black and white. So remember, the proper pronunciation is mortality, not motility. I see even professors pronouncing this incorrectly as motility. Motility is, motion, movement, sperm motility we talk about, right? We don't talk about mortality is death rate is mortality, not motility, right? So what does this say? The better the colostrum feeding, the better the immunity, right? Higher the weight gain, better or lower the feed conversion, less diarrhea related problems, less mortality, right? So this is why we say that there was a question, asking what were the long-term and short-term effects of poor colostrum feeding was, right? So poor weight gain leads to problems in body weight gain, not only body weight gain but also health related problems. Breeding gets delayed, lactation yield is lower in these animals when they become adults and calve, so on and so forth. Long-term effects, right? So the important thing to realize here is, the farmer did not have to spend extra money to get these better figures. He just needed to feed the same colostrum, following the better practices that we talked about, the four aspects, right? And that resulted in better feed conversion, better body weight gain, better health status, and reduced mortality, right? So long-term effects, I just told you about those. Is a reference if anybody wants to check this out, you're welcome to do so. Right. Now we talked about bottle feeding, bucket feeding, calf feed or stomach tubing and suckling the mother. And now it goes to the next level. Do you have any idea what these are? So these are called automatic calf feeders. See, look at all the tubes going in. So we are looking at the rear side of it, right? So the front side would look something like this. So this is an automatic feeder. Toilet this is feed, calf feed. See on the floor, calf starter, right? So this is the nipple where the calf drinks milk. See, milk spilled on the floor, right? මේ මැස්සොත් වහලා ඉන්නවා. ඔස්ට්‍රේලියාවෙත් මැස්සෝ ඉන්නවා. ලංකාව විතරක් නෙමෙයි. මේ see all over, right? So calf automatic milk feeder, and here calf start or concentrate feeder, right? So this is actually a video. See, there's a video somewhere, right? So see if I can play that. Now I'm not going to go through the whole video. I'm just going to go. I have given you the YouTube link at the bottom, right? So you are welcome to look this up on YouTube and you can watch it. So there are two videos. So basically what this shows is calf drinking from the feeder, and you can put milk powder, right? Or you can put milk or milk powder and then and program it, right? So I want you to read up the pros and cons or the advantages and disadvantages. Obviously, it's going to be expensive. See, the major advantage is that you can program this to feed different calves according to the different needs, right? So, certain based on the weight, some calves will be 30 kilograms, some calves will be 25, some will be 40, right? So when you program this machine to feed different quantities to different calves based on their body weight gain, daily weight gain, etc., etc. It will dispense the correct amount to calves. Right, so this is a major advantage of this type of automatic feeder. There's a second video here. Um, so there's a different brand. Now that was so this is a Dairy Master, right? So similar thing again. I have given the YouTube link at the bottom. So please go to YouTube and watch it. Right, similar thing but different brand. Same kind of programming shown here. Right. So take a minute, pause the video and see if you can understand what this says. Okay, I hope you paused and now came back to the video. You have already interpreted this chart, right? So this talks about average daily gain, kilograms per day, average daily body weight gain, kilograms per day between day 10 and 65 of life, right? So essentially this is while the calf is still drinking milk, right? And this says milk during the first lactation, 3 or 5 days in milk. Usually we say lactation is 305 days long, right? So what does this say? The higher the body weight gain during this phase, right, the higher the milk production as an adult animal, right? So these guys that gained at 500 grams per day only produce 7,000 kilograms of milk in the first lactation, right? Whereas these guys that had showed a higher body weight gain during the pre-weaning phase, they produce as much as 13-14,000 liters, right? Of course, like any natural system, there will be guys who gain only 500 grams and but also produce 11,000, 12,000 liters here. But the trend is that the higher the body weight gain during pre-weaning phase, the higher the milk produced as adult animals. So these guys are now 2 years old, right? So these are the first 65 days of life. Here, uh, they are 2 years plus, right? Yet, so this, so it reflects that the better the colostrum you give, the better the body weight gain and higher the milk yield. Because we already showed the better the immunity, the better the body weight gain on that previous chart, right? Right. So now we talk about the esophageal groove. You already learned about this during your anatomy in the first year, right? So I've also, like I said, I uploaded one journal article, a review on esophageal groove. It's relatively long. I don't want you to go through the whole thing, but you know, um, uh, go through it, scan it to find answers to the questions I asked on the pre-lecture questions, right? So basically I just need to, you already done this during your first year, so all I'm going to do is some refresh, right? So do you remember the major function of the esophageal groove? To prevent milk going into what? I already talked about it earlier. To prevent milk going into the rumen, right? So it ensures that the milk directly goes to the abomasum because that's where the enzymatic digestion takes place, right? So usually in nature it's stimulated by the suckling action and certain, components of milk. When they touch the throat reflex, it elicits the throat reflex and stimulates closure of the esophageal groove. But then there's also conditioning closure, which means when they see the milk preparation, etc., esophageal groove closure takes place, right? So read about this and read the text that I've uploaded as reference material. Say, so water would directly get into the rumen, whereas milk will go into the abomasum, right? So if it was just the suckling motion that stimulated esophageal groove closure, then if you give water with a bottle also, it will stimulate the closure of the esophageal groove, right? But it doesn't. So that is because it's the milk components that it is sensitive to, such as milk proteins, glucose solutions, sodium salts. Of course, milk has electrolytes, so on, right? So see, directly gets into the abomasum. And in nature there would be no need for an esophageal groove to be functional in an adult animal because adult animals won't drink milk, right? So um, the they lose functionality of the esophageal groove by 12 to 16 weeks. Read about this. I've given some details here. I'm going to go into details. And then it's really important for you to know how to tube a calf, a stomach tube a calf, or intubate, right? So a typical calf feeder looks like this, right? It has a very blunt end. It should not have a sharp end because if it's sharp, it can damage the throat of the calves, resulting in cicatrization or fibrosis of the throat, which can be permanent damage. So it has to be, you have to use proper equipment. Don't use අර මාළු ටැංකිය වලට දාන හුළං ගහන බට එහෙම hardware එකෙන් අරගෙන ඒවා දාන්න එපා. Because they are very fragile, sensitive young animals, right? So I'm not going to go into details here because you can read everything here. If there are any questions, I will answer during the Q&A session done live, right? So basically what's important is you need to mark the length, right? You should not go on inserting everything. You just mark the length of the tube from elbow to the tip of the nose, right? And then you have to make sure it's inside the esophagus and not the trachea, because if it's inside the trachea, the milk will go into the lungs. So this would be the last slide for the day. I'll go through these steps again. So make sure that you have a soft tear shaped end, tear, not tear. Tear again, kandula wage, kandula. Okay, so that it's soft and it won't damage the mucosa of the throat or the esophagus, right? And then you need to extend the neck. මෙහෙම නෙමෙයි බෙල්ල extend කරලා, or you have to measure from the elbow to the tip of the nose. It will be approximately 1.5 feet, but it will differ from breed to breed. So therefore it's important to do this step and then mark with a tape. ඔය ෆෙල් පෙන් වලින් පැන්සල් වලින් ගහන්න එපා, ඒවා මැකලා යනවා පේන්නේ නැහැ, right? Mark with a tape, cello tape එකක් හරි, ideally a colored tape එකක් මෙහෙම වටේට දාන්න. එතකොට මෙතෙන්ට ගියන් පස්සේ දැන් ගිහිල්ලා you can stop, right? නැත්තම් මෙහෙම දාගෙන යනවා අන්තිමට පිටිපස්සෙන් ඉලට එනකම්ම දාගෙන යනවා. So that's why you mark with a tape, right? So ideally you want it to be in standing position, right? Not recumbent. If it's lying down, small animal නේ උස්සන්න පුළුවන්. උස්සලා තව කෙනෙකුට අල්ල ගන්න කියලා දාන්න, right? Otherwise it can aspirate into the lungs. right? So in Sri Lanka, of course, generally it's not a big deal, but in cold climates or up in Norelia, this plastic can become hardened, right? So if it is very hard, it's stiff. Esophagus එක ඇරෙන්නේ වංගුවලින් නැවි නැවි යන්නේ නැහැ. ඒක නිසා put it place it in warm water. So it will soften up the plastic and make it pliable, right? And ideally, you should also lubricate it with something like vegetable oil or coconut oil. Sabang එහෙම දාන්න එපා. Can be irritating to the calf's mucosa, esophageal mucosa and the oral mucosa, right? And then dala. So this is very important. You don't force it. You product cut dala. You let the calf to chew and swallow, right? Um, the calf will automatically swallow. You just the calf will start swallowing. You just facilitate the process. ගිලිනකොට තව චුට්ටක් තල්ලු කරනවා හිමින් හිමින් gently you push but you do not force it because if you do force even if you have a tear shaped end it can still end up damaging the mucosa, right? And then now once you have it, so while you do this, have this bag at a lower position, right? Otherwise මේක දානකොටම මේකෙන් කිරියන්න පටන් ගන්නවා if you have it raised එල්ලලා හරි කොහේ හරි තියනවනම් මේක තියෙන එල්ලන්න එල්ලුවොත් එකපාරටම කිරියන්න පටන් ගන්නවා හරි මෙතනින් වහලා තිබ්බත් don't take a chance, so you can keep it at a lower level or make sure this is really 100% locked, right? So then before you open it or raise the bag, make sure you have put it into the correct tube. uh, it can go into the, so what is the correct tube? The correct tube is the esophagus, but it can accidentally get into the trachea also. Usually if it goes into the trachea, the calf will start to cough, but some animals may not cough, right? It's inside the trachea, animal doesn't cough, so you think it's in the esophagus and you put milk, but eventually milk ends up going into the lungs, not the abomasum. End of story. New dead calf, right? So you don't want to do that. You want to make sure that it's in the esophagus before you let the milk in, right? So you can do that by now. Do you think in a normal calf you can palpate the esophagus, or can you palpate the trachea? Yes, you can palpate the trachea if you feel this area, but you cannot feel the esophagus. But now when the tube gets into the esophagus, now you will feel the esophagus as a rigid tube with the tube inside, right? And then so you should, if this goes inside the esophagus, you should feel two tubes side by side, one trachea, the other one the esophagus. But if you feel only one tube, then it didn't go in the esophagus, instead it went in the trachea, right? So if it's in the trachea, immediately withdraw, right? So another important point, make sure that now once you have once you make sure it's in the esophagus and you give the 3 liters or 4 liters or whatever milk, make sure the tube is empty before you withdraw, because if the tube is not empty when you withdraw, when the tip is near the throat, the milk that was on the tube will be released into the throat, and on in the at the throat, from the throat it may enter the trachea through the larynx, right? So that can lead to pneumonia, right? So therefore it's best uh, to empty the tube. So how do you empty it? You can lower this bag, you can keep this bag here, and then by gravity, whatever milk that was in the tube, inside the tube, will return to the bag. But for to do that, you will have to make sure the bag is placed below the level of the tube, right? So once you take it out, remember you need to wash it, sanitize and dry it, right? Otherwise if this gets blocked, one thing, it can get blocked, and next time when you feed, the milk won't go fast. And secondly, if you leave, if you don't wash it, if you leave milk inside this, it will get, contaminated. Bacteria will grow, and next time you feed the calf, you will introduce bacteria into the calf unnecessarily. Right, so remember this step, don't forget this step. Okay, so that is it for today, right? Next week we will talk about what happens after colostrum feeding. Okay guys, see you next week. Thank you, and see you tomorrow with the discussion.